Hey everybody, Bryce Koon here with the Crowded Booth, and we have another great episode coming up right here on our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Today we're talking about the Georgia Bulldogs. What kind of weight will Stetson Bennett have to carry for this Georgia offense to be successful in 2022? All that and more. Palmer Thombs joins the show.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. Coming on the Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Talking Georgia football, that means Palmer Thombs is on the show. Palmer, appreciate you. How excited are you ready? We're like, what? This episode will come out on Monday, so we have, not too much longer.
12 days on Monday. We're recording this on Sunday, and we're Stetson Bennett number of days away to Georgia, Oregon, 13 days. We were talking about on the site on our board over at Dogs HQ, how lucky that number has been for Georgia recently. Stetson Bennett obviously wearing it. Jordan Davis going 13th overall. You want to extend it to the pros. Matthew Stafford in his 13th season won a Super Bowl. And, hey, got my degree on the 13th.
There we go. You had that planned, and just so some of the viewers know, I did not know you were going to answer that eloquently. So look right there. He's got the UGA degree for sure. Hey, but look, we're going to talk about the Georgia offense, and I think it's an intriguing conversation because, to the casual fan, they say, holy cow, they've got these three tight ends, and they're just going to, throw the ball over the yard. And that might happen. They are going to utilize them. Todd Monken's going to have a lot of fun. Opposing defense coordinators, it's going to be a nightmare. But I think the question we want to ask today, and want to ask you, is how much of the weight is Stetson Bennett going to have to carry? And particularly because of the news coming out about the running back room is, one, you lost two NFL running backs. I think as of right now, there's probably not a guy in there that you feel comfortable saying there's no drop-off between the two guys you just lost. They've got talent, and you've sustained a couple of injuries. So let's talk about the running back room first off. Kind of give fans an insight of what does it look like and what is Georgia dealing with, and what is the job of this coaching staff to get these guys prepared to play?
Yeah, obviously Zamir White and James Cook headed off to the NFL. Cook was a second-round pick with the Buffalo Bills. White went in the fourth to the Las Vegas Raiders. Almost called them the Oakland Raiders.
That's okay. He had a touchdown last night.
Las Vegas Raiders, and yes, he did. Zamir, both of them playing very well in the preseason. Seen some highlights of both of them. But as they are off to their NFL training camps, Georgia has to regroup in that running back room. They signed two players in the class of 2022. They bring back the other three that were in that room last year to keep that number at 5 in the room. We spoke with Georgia running game coordinator, running backs coach, Del McGee, and he said their scholarship quota sets them at 6, but they haven't been able to hit that number here recently. Just because they've had some older guys, more experienced guys in that room, and they haven't felt the need to do that. They've felt that they had the guys, the talent that they could handle a running back room with just 5, but it does put them susceptible to a lack of depth, and that's where Georgia is at now. Today's breaking news today on Dogs HQ, freshman running back Andrew Paul suffered a torn ACL in Georgia's second scrimmage of the season. Tough break for him, freshman that had been coming on very strong. Mentioned that they signed 2 running backs in that class of 2022. Branson Robinson was the number 2 ranked running back in the country. Very highly touted player out of Mississippi. But Andrew Paul was somebody that they were very excited about. He came onto the scene late in his recruitment, rushed for over 2,000 yards as a senior in Dallas, Texas, helping lead his high school to a 3rd straight state championship. Not sure how that gets overlooked in a state like that, but I guess when, things are that big and that big of a state, a player like that can get overlooked maybe at a lower classification than your, big schools there that are playing in Jerry's Dome. They were certainly excited about Andrew Paul. He had made tons of progress here in fall camp. Both he and Branson Robinson enrolled this summer. Were not with the team in the spring. They just had 3 scholarship guys then. And even though Robinson was the higher rated of the two, it seemed like Paul was ahead of him on the depth chart. So obviously, with how many guys Georgia likes to use in that running back room, losing one of them in an already limited running back room from a numbers standpoint, losing one of them is certainly going to be a tough blow. Add on top of that Kendall Milton has been dealing with hamstring injuries throughout fall camp. He's a guy that has battled injury throughout his entire career, and he's one that you were looking at to take a step up. I think everybody in that room was being looked at to take a step up in replacing Zamir White and James Cook. Kenny McIntosh has received a ton of praise during fall camp, and the pressure is certainly going to be on him, to be that number one guy, to stay healthy. The pressure is on all of them to stay healthy now that they're down to just 4 scholarship guys. They really can't afford another injury because they don't have the depth to sustain that and be able to just go with the flow there. So McIntosh is going to take a heavy burden. Certainly a talented player, has been used as a versatile back out of the backfield, great pass catcher. But can he carry the rock like Zamir White did? And even like what James Cook did at times? Can Kendall Milton stay healthy, and can he be that workhorse running back? And Dejan Edwards, somebody that has, been touted as the human victory cigar by some people on the Georgia beat. When you see Dejan Edwards in the game, typically means Georgia's been up pretty big and trying to do their best to put the game away, run that clock out, and hand the ball off to Dejan. He's been the featured back on specific drives late in games, in quarters, but he hasn't been a featured back in Georgia's system. And so, he's now being thrust into that kind of position with Milton dealing with hamstring injuries. That's an injury that can, prolong itself, can kind of carry itself, on for quite some time, because really the only thing that you can do to heal a hamstring is rest. And Georgia doesn't have that much time to rest with Oregon 13 days away. So McIntosh taking on a bigger load. Milton's got to get healthy. Edwards taking on a bigger load. And now with the Andrew Paul news of his injury, Branson Robinson being pushed up the depth chart, and certainly having to take on some more responsibility than maybe he was expecting to as a freshman.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of guys, and you detailed it right there, that are going to have to kind of in new roles. They're not complimentary backs. They're kind of some of the feature guys, and Georgia's going to need that. And Palmer, we know they love to run the football. They're going to run the football, no doubt about it. But what rests on the shoulders of Stetson Bennett? And you and I have had we've texted back and forth about this. There's still some disrespect to Stetson Bennett around the country. SEC Network has put out their top 5 SEC quarterbacks. A bunch of different analysts have done it. And if Stetson is there, he's number 5 or number 4. And this is a guy coming off winning a national championship. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We were texting back and forth the other day. It's a lazy take to say that this kid is not good. And I think a lot of people still think the story he has is cool, but this is not the same kid that stepped on campus in year 1. This is a completely different player, and not just because of the hairstyle and the work in the weight room. Talk to me about what rests on this kid's shoulders, and for you, what do you see that makes it different than maybe national pundits and people who are not as familiar with the program?
Yeah, I mean, he's just so much more comfortable. Like you said, he's not the same player that stepped on campus back in 2017 as a preferred walk-on. He's not the same player that came back to Georgia in 2019 as a scholarship guy. He's not the same player that was thrust into, a starting position in 2020. And he's really not the same player that he was in 2021 as he was once again thrust into a starting position. Stetson Bennett is comfortable with his position now. He knows that he's the starter. He's not having to look over his shoulder to see a JT Daniels, a Dwan Mathis, a Jamie Newman, a Jake Fromm, even though that he was backing up Jake Fromm, he feels very comfortable in his position as Georgia's starting quarterback. And I think that we saw that this spring. He's taken on a leadership role, both within this offense and within this team as a whole. Spoke to the media at SEC Media Days. He's comfortable with Todd Monken as an offensive coordinator. And, I think that makes a huge difference. Georgia going into a 3rd season with Todd Monken as their offensive coordinator, 3rd season with Bennett as the starting quarterback. And let's just pause and take that in for a second, because who would have ever thought that Stetson Bennett would be a 3-year starting quarterback at Georgia.
I would have said third year at Georgia. I mean, he's been there long enough. You're comfortable saying that, but I think you hit the nail on the head with third-year starter. But with what Bennett has, I mean, this is a kid who possesses a moxie about him. I think that he has a silent confidence that is maybe not so silent anymore. Like, he's pretty confident in his abilities coming off a national championship, but he's got to have the guys to throw to. And so I want to take it to the perimeter now. I feel good about the offensive line. I mean, obviously they got to replace some guys, but it's starting to feel like they still have some really good depth there. So let's take it to the outside, Palmer. There's been some injuries. Arian Smith, a wildly talented kid. We've seen what he's been able to do when he's on the field. It's been rare, but when he's on the field, he's gone for a foreseeable time. Kyrus Jackson is obviously battling some ailments, was never really healthy last year, battled through it. What does this wide receiver room look like? And no, I'm not talking about the trio of the tight ends. Let's stick solely to the guys that are, we'll just say, 215 pounds and under for this topic right here. What does it look like on the wideout position?
Well, and you keep saying a trio of tight ends. I think that there's more than that.
Oscar Delp is on campus. That's true.
We'll get there, though. But, yeah, I mean, I think that Georgia feels – very confident in the guys that they have at the top of that wide receiver room. They need to, like the running backs, they need to develop depth. You can't just rely on 3 or 4 guys to get through an entire season. Kirby talked about it yesterday after Georgia's second scrimmage, was asked, hey, Arian's injury, we know it. But why? Why is it that the wide receiver room is always getting hurt? Why is it that Arian Smith is always getting hurt? Jermaine Burton battled injuries before he left Georgia. You've had guys, constantly battling injuries in that wide receiver room. And Kirby said it's because of just how much they get used. They are constantly running. They are constantly in movement. And so those soft tissue injuries are they come at a very high rate in that wide receiver room. So you've got to watch. Same thing with the running backs. If we're talking about Kendall Milton and a hamstring, you got to watch those soft tissue injuries in the wide receiver room. They're jumping up and they're coming down, can come down funny on an ankle. They're cutting, they're turning. You've got to be careful because of just how much pressure is put on that position. The hits that they're taking, the miles that they're putting on their body, running and running and running, even when they're not getting the ball, they're running. And so you look at that wide receiver room, you feel confident that A.D. Mitchell is going to take a step up after his true freshman year. Ladd McConkey returns as a redshirt sophomore now, was a standout as a redshirt freshman last year. You mentioned Kyrus Jackson battling a little bit of an injury that he suffered on Saturday. Think that he'll be fine from sources that I talked to. There's not too much concern about his status, and he's somebody that is super, super tough and very reliable. They feel confident that anytime, Kyrus isn't going to battle drops. Kyrus isn't going to, he's going to be reliable. He's going to be out there. Even last year, like you said, that wasn't completely healthy last year. Was just a shell of his 2020 version when he led the team in receiving. Showed a really good rapport with Stetson Bennett then. Georgia is obviously hoping that he can get back on that same page in 2022. I think that those are your top 3. Georgia feels very confident in those top 3. But outside of those, you've kind of got a second group of guys, and Arian Smith was in it, second group of guys that have battled injuries and that you're looking to take a step forward. I mentioned that Arian Smith was in it. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint is in it. Granted, he played in 15 games last year, but go back to that 2020 season, he suffered a really gruesome season-ending injury just when he was starting to show promise. I don't think he's shown quite as much since that injury as a receiver, as a pass catcher, maybe as he was before. Really great blocker. We talked to Brock Bowers about that national championship touchdown, and that was opened up by the blocking of Rosemy-Jacksaint. He's in that group. Dominic Blaylock is in that group as he continues to try and get back to his pre-injury self, pre-2 injuries, suffering a torn ACL in the 2019 SEC championship game at the tail end of a really strong freshman season for him, and then suffering another one before the 2020 season that cost him that entire campaign. They were slow to bring him back in 2021. He showed that he was able to get back out on the field, but is he able to be the same guy that he was before the injury? And then the last tier of receivers that I look at is just guys that are young, guys that haven't been asked to do much, whether that's a true freshman like Dylan Bell, somebody like Denylon Morissette or CJ Smith, or somebody that has been around the program but hasn't been asked to do a ton in Jackson Meeks. Those guys are going to have to, again, you can't just rely on 3, 4, 5 guys to get through a season at wide receiver, especially if one of those guys gets hurt above them, like what happened here with Arian Smith. You're going to need guys to step up. Dylan Bell is a name we've heard a lot during fall camp. We talked about freshmen out of Texas with Andrew Paul. You got another freshman out of Texas here with Dylan Bell. He's out of the Houston area as opposed to the Dallas area for Paul. But he's somebody that has constantly been impressing when we've been out there. So, kind of look to him as somebody that is going to have to step up if Georgia has a need at wide receiver, like it feels like they already do.
So the concern for fans, you might have just got a little bit concerned. You showed some worry about the depth. Now, where I'll pivot to is, Palmer, you have an embarrassment of riches at the tight end position. And I think it's for a lot of fans are not as worried about some of the depth at wide receiver. They're willing to let guys, like you mentioned in that tier 2, come along, and tier 3 come along at a normal, evolution pace, because you have a 3-headed monster that you've seen in glimpses with Eric Gilbert, obviously still trying to come back. And then you got a kid named Oscar Delp, who he probably is going to see significant time anywhere else in the country in year 1, and I don't know how much time he's going to see. How do you share the ball with all these guys? So talk to me about this group, and I know people, Georgia fans especially, are just so excited the fact of seeing 3 tight ends line up on the right side at some point during the season, and it's going to happen.
4 tight ends.
You love the 4. You love the 4.
Yeah, I mean, we asked Todd Monken about it, and he said, we asked him, hey, when you're dealing with this, you've got all these pass catchers, all these very incredibly talented tight ends. You look at the last 3 recruiting classes, 2022, the number 2 tight end in the country, Oscar Delp. 2021, the number 2 tight end in the country, Brock Bowers. 2020, number 2 tight end in the country, Darnell Washington. Who was the number 1 tight end that year? Eric Gilbert. You add him to that room. So Georgia's been able to sign the number 2 tight end out of high school the last 3 years, and they get the number 1 from that 2020 class out of the transfer portal. So we asked Todd Monken about that. Hey, how much are you going to try and run a 14 personnel? Is that realistic? He said, you don't want to run it too much, because if you do it too much, you're going to end up with all your wide receivers in the transfer portal. But, I think that because of the lack of depth that Georgia has at wide receiver, you're going to see it. I mean, we joke about it, but I don't think it's a joke. I think Georgia is going to run 14 personnel at some point. We've seen Todd Hartley at practice pushing Oscar Delp into the drills, saying, hey, when they've got 3 lines of receiver routes that they're running, and the quarterbacks are throwing balls to them, and then they're swapping ends of the field. Well, they run through it with first 3 tight ends with Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, Eric Gilbert. Hartley is saying, Delp, get in there. Delp, get your reps. Delp, get in there. Because he knows how important it is to have him getting those reps, even if he's that number 4 tight end. You've got guys making plays on the number 2 team in Eric Gilbert yesterday at the scrimmage, making plays on the number 2 team that are going to be playing on that number 1 team come important snaps during the season. And that's because Georgia is going to A, rotate a ton of tight ends, and B, use a ton of tight ends at the same time. So for all the concerns, like you said, all the concerns that Georgia has at wide receiver, maybe even at running back, you feel very confident in the pass catchers that you have in that tight end room. And I think that these are guys that are going to continue to come along. Brock Bowers has said, we talked to him this past week, and he said that he feels like he's, going to be a better version of what he was last year. He doesn't seem, content just settling with the incredible season that he had. He wants to do more. Does that mean his numbers are going to be better? Maybe not, because you've got 4 tight ends, and you've got 4 tight ends, as long as they all stay healthy, that'll be on the field. Darnell Washington, as we talk about health, he's somebody that wasn't healthy at the beginning of the last season. And because he wasn't healthy, we got to see what Brock Bowers was capable of. But you add Darnell back in and at full strength from the get-go, he's going to be in there early and often. He's going to be getting the ball early and often. And so, for every pass that goes to Darnell Washington, that's one that doesn't go to Oscar Delp, doesn't go to Eric Gilbert, doesn't go to Brock Bowers. Same thing with all four of them. So yes, you are going to want to spread the ball around, keep all those mouths happy in terms of, their production, their skill set. And they have different skill sets. That's the other thing is that you've got a former receiver in Eric Gilbert. You've got a former running back in, an H-back type in Brock Bowers. You've essentially got an offensive tackle in Darnell Washington. So you've got a wide variety of ways that you can use these guys. And that's why I think Georgia is going to use all four of them.
I don't know if there's going to be a number 4 tight end that's going to be used as effectively as Oscar Delp will this year. So
there might not be number 1 tight ends that get used as effectively as Oscar Delp gets used as a number 4 tight end.
That's true. Todd Monken has a embarrassment of riches to work with this offense. And so we wrap it up with this question right here. And this might be a little bit of a personal opinion piece on your side. I know you report a lot of news, so we'll give you let you have a little opinionated aspect. What is in your thought process from what you've seen through fall camp, what you've observed? What's the sky? Like, what's the limit on this? What this offense can do? I mean, what is the potential of what they could do? Can this be an offense that is just as explosive as last year? I don't think a lot of people paid attention to really that. They just said, "Hey, that defense is really, really good. They didn't have to do a lot." What's your opinion? How high can this offense take this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as you look at this team, you mentioned last year and the need for, not needing as many points because that defense was holding teams to single digits, rarely in double digits. This offense wasn't asked to do much. What did they do? They did a lot with it still. And that's how Georgia ended up blowing out a ton of teams that, maybe they shouldn't have blown out. Maybe they didn't play the best game offensively, but because the defense played so well, the scoreboard doesn't reflect a poor game offense. And I think about that Florida game. Stetson Bennett did not have a great showing, but because the defense set them up with, 3 straight turnovers to in that first half, one that the offense didn't get its hands on because Nakobe Dean ran it in himself. But twice in a row, back-to-back drives, did Nolan Smith take the ball away and get Georgia in a position where it could quickly score. And so, to me, I think that you're not going to have that this year. That doesn't mean you're going to have a bad defense. But I think that this preseason has given a little bit of a wake-up call, a reality check of sorts on the offensive side of the ball and on the defensive side of the ball, where Georgia may not be holding teams to, single digits, keeping them in the teens. But that means that this offense is going to have control of the ball more. They're going to have to score. They're going to be asked to score, and they are going to score. I feel very confident in saying that. I've talked with some folks here, just early feeling about the Oregon game. As I've gotten to see the offense more and more throughout this fall camp, my prediction just keeps going up on the amount of points that I think that they'll score in that game. Do I think the defense gives up some points? Yeah, but I think the offense is going to be able to, match that, go toe for toe with Oregon there and score at will. I think that the only thing that will be holding this offense back this year is if Georgia is ahead and Georgia decides that it wants to run the ball, run the clock. And I mean, because I think that with a veteran quarterback, with these pass catchers, with these dynamic running backs that they do have, I think they can score whenever they want.
That's scary to hear for opposing fans. And I think, you alluded to it. I mean, this offense, they were good last year. They didn't have to be great. And I think they really have the potential to be a very, very great offense. And at times elite. If things start clicking, and like you said, a couple of those guys, what's going to be scary, Palmer, is if the tight ends live up to what we think they can be, and then the running backs, they take a step up. You see a guy really take a leadership role. The wide receivers, maybe one of those tier 2 or tier 3 guys has a breakout season like we saw an A.D. Mitchell or a Ladd McConkey have last year. That's when this offense gets really unguardable, and I think it's going to be very fun to watch. They take
Oregon.
Go ahead.
Hey, we haven't mentioned the offensive line here. I think that what makes all this possible, what makes it possible for the running backs to get open, what makes it possible for Stetson Bennett to stand back in the pocket and distribute the ball to these wide receivers, these pass catchers, is a very talented offensive line. They are going to be one of the best in the country. Former offensive lineman myself, wanting to give a shout out to the big boys there, because I think they're going to do an incredible job. And you can't forget about those guys when you're talking about this offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a very solid group with the potential to really be, I think, one of the top 5 offensive lines in the country when all's said and done. It's going to be a fun year to watch for Georgia fans. They take on Oregon here. We are so close to college football season. Week 0 coming up. I'll ask you real quick as we shake it out. Do you have a Week 0 game scheduled? Like, are you ready to watch one in particular?
I'll be in Chapel Hill for the North Carolina-Florida A&M game. Decided to take my weekend off from covering Georgia, go visit family up in Chapel Hill, and take in a game as a fan. So excited to do that.
Disappointed I'm not going to see you in Macon, but I get it. It's okay. That's no big deal. No big deal. But no, hey, listen, let's wrap it up and let people know, where they can find your work. Obviously, Dogs HQ with On 3. Where can they find you on social media? Because it's about to start going, and I think this is a really, really good time for you guys to get some more signups and continue to see y'all's site grow as well.
Yeah, Dogs HQ. Come over, get involved in our message board, the Dog Walk. Listen to our podcast, Dog Walk Talk. We're discussing a lot of these same things over there. And we want your take on things as fans. So take advantage of our 7-day free trial, sign up. Great time to get involved, not only team coverage, but recruiting coverage as well. And hey, like you said, great time to follow me on Twitter, at Palmer Thombs on social media.
Palmer's a good follow on social media as well, so make sure to hit him up right there. I'll answer. I'm ready for that 10 p.m. kickoff, Vanderbilt against Hawaii on Saturday. I'm pumped for that one. We'll appreciate it. Thank you so much once again, Palmer. We'll talk defense later on in the week.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The crowded booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.